Yeah, this is interesting question based on what I shared earlier, in that I feel like the position I'm in now, I've got to mostly by just allowing the current to take me, right? I kind of just step through open doors. And I think that was a really valuable thing to do at the beginning of my business because I just needed to learn, right?
Welcome back to This Week in No Code. I'm here with my co-host David Pal and myself, JJ Englert, and we're excited for another fantastic episode of This Week in No Code today. First off, I hope you all had a wonderful holiday, a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and whatever other holidays you celebrate. I hope it was great, safe, and healthy. For the show today, we have a great slate of news, and then we're interviewing Scott, the Coda guy, and going to learn a lot more about Coda, how he's able to build a very large no-code agency on top of it, and what he thinks about no-code going into 2024. So without any further ado, let's kick it off to David for our no-code news of the week.
Well, hello everyone from Los Angeles again this week. Not many more weeks in Los Angeles, but Los Angeles this week. And I am going to start off the news as an AI robot. I am a robot. Our first news story is talking about Channel One News. Channel1.ai, the website, is the first AI powered, AI first, as they call it, news network. They are promoting and providing news spoken and created by and with AI. The idea is that the reporters are avatars that look like they're speaking. You have hand gestures with kind of funny backgrounds that look like they're actually standing in an office or in a studio, but are actually just generating themselves. You can customize these, you can tailor these avatars, and they are putting out lots of news written with the help of AI. Even some of the animations, the whole video is cut together with AI. Images are being created with AI, the filler.
It's all AI, baby.
Yeah. AI.
David, this is pretty incredible. I'm interested to see how the audience reacts. This is weird, right? Because I think we have a generation of people that, like my mother-in-law, for example, she grew up on the morning show. She loves those people, right? Like she tunes in for those people. And now, if you have AI avatars, like, are you going to tune in because for that reason? You're probably not. And then it's like, okay, so it's going to a new generation of folks, and who is that, and how is that news served, and why are they going to keep tuning in? So I think they're going to have to find their audience. They're going to have to find their stride. Generally, I like the concept. I know it's going to put a lot of people out of jobs, which is unfortunate, but I do think that it could help aid in the sense of news faster, and maybe less opinionated if you're able to prompt it, in a neutral way.
Yeah, I don't know that there will be people changing jobs. I don't know that everyone loses their job because it still has to read from real news, right? It can't be, fake nonsense. It's still the facts, and the journalism still needs to be there, and which is going to reinforce people getting into journalism to actually find the original story. It does cast a wider net of what news becomes relevant to me, the person, which, by the way, gets tailored to me instead of just the linear TV. Hey, I'm watching the morning show. This is what everyone in New York is going to watch this morning. No, this is what I want to watch, what I care about, what's interesting. In this clip on their website, when they show their first example broadcast, they actually show a clip from, I think, a hurricane in France where they're on the ground interviewing a guy who is going through this. The original clip, he's talking in French, but then they can dub over it with his mouth also changing. So it looks like he's actually talking in English, and you could change it to any language you want. Right. And so now you get on the ground reporters with context that are different than just the spin that, I'm not going to say it, MSM, mainstream media, whatever spin they're talking about. But whatever is actually happening, you can see it and not just a filtered lens, which is really interesting. But to your point about the people, So, when a pundit goes on air and has an opinion about something, it's their opinion that you feel
Mhm.
like you're listening to. Well, that person, and then that person may get vilified over the internet. Hey,
Mhm.
that's such a bad take. Oh my God, what the hell? Here it's like a faceless face of a person. Like there isn't a person behind it. So
Right.
who do you get mad at? So I wonder
Or
if
who
it
do you
actually
connect
will
with?
polarize opinions, like more extreme, because you're like whoever's writing it can kind of just hide behind this face of nothing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm excited to follow along and even partake in it to see how this is. I think it's the first wave of new media creation and content. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think we'll see more of this in like sports broadcasters or like broadcasting games real time, things like that. I think that is like the next step. And then there's so many more things that come with it. And so I think the opportunity is huge. It's interesting to see this happening. Why don't we move on to our next piece of news, which is, earlier in this podcast, I think it was just the first episode even, we brought on Doc Williams to talk about the 2022 no code report and what he expected for the 2023 no code report. And if you haven't had a chance to check out that episode, definitely go back and check out that episode. A lot of great nuggets were dropped with Doc Williams in that first episode. But now we're back with the 2023 no code report and his findings. And some of these things are really cool. And we just kind of want to talk through each of these with you at a high level, and then we'll move on to the next point. But generally, if you couldn't tell already, AI integration into no code platforms is happening. AI is integrated in the Flutterflow, Airtable, Notion, Zapier, BuildShip, Make. Many others are integrating AI into their platforms.
Mhm.
Mainstream adoption of AI has become a mainstream topic. It's growing in that entrepreneur, and we're seeing it most with that. But AI is being adopted into the mainstreams that way. David, what did you think about the findings or anything you want to call out particularly?
I thought it was interesting this year in the survey, more people identified as experts. Like there's an increase in people who are feeling like experts, which that may be just because people have had another year in the industry or they're actively taking courses and trying to become experts. That was a good sign. I think we need more experts and not just people
Yeah.
learning and abandoning, right? People are sticking with it. This year, more people are building their own SaaS products instead of just building agencies and freelancing. I thought that was a good sign. And that correlated with the fact that more people are labeling themselves as entrepreneurs and not just independent builders or creators or a no coder, right, for the sake of no coding. I think that's great. I think that's how I feel about no code. Like I kind of label myself as an entrepreneur more than a no coder, and I think that will be good. We'll see how that changes as tools move upstream, start trying to sell to enterprises. I don't know that entrepreneurs always fit in large corporate environments, and so we may see some of this jockeying of no coder, developer, and entrepreneur, kind of balancing it out. The thing that was most surprising to me in this was that people were labeling everything as too expensive. That was the biggest challenge with adopting no code. What's the most common problem using no code? And there was a big increase, and it's the biggest category is it's too expensive.
That is
I-
interesting.
It's an interesting point because it may have gotten more expensive, but it is definitely way cheaper than any alternative. And so I'm not sure what people like. I want to dig into this question a little bit more to understand why people feel this way. Yeah, like building this with code, like most things you're building with code would be 10 times as expensive. So I don't really know what they're talking about.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I don't know how big the audience for this was. I think the audience in itself, a little skewed in the sense that I put it out to my audience, they put out, and we're generally more of a professional, expert-led audience, that
Mhm.
kind of thing. But with that being said, I thought that it was interesting to hear the expensive part, probably because they hadn't experienced code and building in
Yeah.
those stacks. I know personally that when I was running my traditional startup is Azure alone costs about $300 a month.
Mhm.
and it was doing very basic database work, very basic database work. And then I had some other things on top of that. And so it was around like $500 to $600 a month to run a very basic two-sided marketplace. And then it was $150 an hour for a traditional
Right.
dApp that took 20 hours to build something very simple. So I don't know. Expensive is, is hard. I think some of the other things that I look towards here, what are creators building with no code and AI? The most popular thing was online businesses. Then it was MVPs, which is kind of like that. And then we got into automation and internal tools, and then marketplaces. But experimenting was 13% of it. So there's still a lot of people just experimenting with no code and AI and trying to see what they could do. Some of the more popular platforms that they had acknowledged in this report were Notion, Airtable, Bubble, Make, Zapier, Webflow, right? And so the first thing I think of is Notion, Airtable, Make, and Zapier. 4 out of the 5 are very easy to learn and to connect things, and for the basic business operations kind of thing.
Yeah.
Bubble being more difficult, but I still think we're seeing a huge popularity in people using no-code tools like Zapier and Notion of just I need something to be better than Google Docs, but I don't want to build a complete web application in Bubble yet. Give me some efficiency, give me a little bit of AI in here, and give me what I need to do my job 20 to 30% faster with just like a 2 or 3 hour learning curve. And I think that's kind of where it's being adopted
Mhm.
well right now. And I think maybe that will get even a little bit more advanced in the new year, but it's not going to be a huge shift.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be fun to see how next year turns out. I'd love to see like something more out like a 6 months from now. How does it change? Follow up with these same people. What's new? What's different?
Yeah.
Um,
I personally think that AI is going to draw people into this technology more and more, right? With people now more inclined to use AI because of what it can give you, and everyone else is using it, kind of thing, and it's kind of mainstream. And so it's like, okay, how do I connect AI with Zapier? And then how do I connect it into my workspace? And then, oh,
mm,
I want to now do this. And so it's like bringing it all together. And I think it will start to kind of bring people into that no code automation space a little bit more, which I'm excited about personally.
yeah, maybe. I'd be nervous that they'd skip no code.
You think they'd
Like
go straight from traditional?
there's a world where they don't need like with things becoming easier to do, the coders who would use no code are going to use AI instead. They don't need the no
For
code work.
coders, yeah,
And
sure.
then more tools will be able to do more with just language. And if that's the mode where people are able to do things, then a visual interface is worse than a text interface. And
Interesting.
so if the tools get better and good enough, then we don't need no code. We'll just use text, right? Because it's still code. It's a
Yeah,
syntax.
yeah.
I know English. I don't need to learn make.
I
Like,
think maybe, like, 5 years we're there. I don't think that's anything in the next year or 2, though. I think we're still a bit a away from that.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. The industry needs 10 years to mature. So
Yeah,
in the middle, we start getting some wiggles of, well, AI may matter more. People will just wait.
yeah. David, what do we got going on with the New York Times, and what are they up to now?
Well, so there's a pretty groundbreaking lawsuit that the New York Times filed against OpenAI, alleging that OpenAI illegally trained their data models and LLMs on millions of New York Times articles, years and years of history, without adequately compensating them for the information. Basically, they scraped all of the New York Times, didn't pay a subscription. And the New York Times is basically saying, "Hey, look, this is all copyrighted. We paid someone to do this. This is ours. Just like Getty images are watermarked. Just because you were able to get your hands on it doesn't make it fair game." So the New York Times is suing them. They're not actually saying, "Hey, here's how the damages that we want." Right? OpenAI is going around and starting to strike deals with publishers. We saw this with Axel Springer and a few others. They're starting to pay them to say, "Hey, look, we want to keep licensing your information." Um, and people will want to feed this real information, right? We're getting to the point where people are using AI to ask questions about current events and they want answers. And so we want this information, which is good. Just like, Channel One changes a little bit of the world of journalism, this does as well, where people are actually writing articles and can get bigger audiences through a centralized chat system like ChatGPT instead of needing a bunch of subscriptions, right? It's like the bundling of journalism through ChatGPT. But the New York Times also brought up some interesting points. In the case, they specifically talk about how OpenAI, when you ask a certain question about what kind of product to use, it pulls the information almost verbatim from a Wirecutter article, which is owned by the New York Times, about how they would select some kind of widget. But
Okay.
what the OpenAI article didn't do was pull the affiliate link,
Reference. Yeah.
right? Which is how they make all their money. So basically, they pulled all of this opportunity away from the New York Times, and they're like, "Hey guys, like this is something we pay for, and or maybe it's free, but we make money through these affiliate links. If you're not honoring that system, then we don't want to play with you," kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
And
the
this is
other,
huge. This is gonna set a precedent for kind of all companies online, right?
yeah, and it's an interesting like position to take. Hey, we have links. We want to get paid for those links. It's an interesting like problem for Chat GPT, and maybe there's a way to solve this. Keep the links in there, right? Like why it's just text, but maybe it doesn't have to be just text. Maybe there are other formats of these responses that are kind of like the same, like an article, right? But
Right.
it uses them differently. The other thing the New York Times specifically calls out is when you ask for information of what the New York Times said about this, sometimes the chat will hallucinate and falsely respond on behalf of the New York Times, which also hurts their brand and changes their behavior. And
Yeah.
so that's another thing that they care about is this reputation of we're a news source, but if the chat bot hallucinates for some random theory, well, it's kind of a problem.
Yeah. And the chatbot isn't referencing New York Times anything as well either, right?
Sometimes they do. If you ask,
Okay.
it may guess that it came from the New York Times, but there was
Okay.
an article where they were the top. It was like a listicle kind of thing, right? The 12 things we'd recommend, but like most of it was not actually from the article.
Okay.
And so they're like, "Oh, this is what the New York Times said," and it wasn't actually what the New York Times had said.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Those are problems.
Yeah, those are real problems. And I think that this is a problem that not just OpenAI is going to deal with, but a lot of people. But as the face of the kind of this industry, they're going to kind of be setting precedent in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
I assume OpenAI is going to need a really big legal department to really kind of pave the way for a lot of this
sure.
legislation that's coming in the coming years for AI.
Yeah, the Uber model. Let's just raise more money, fight the battles. Eventually, it'll change. And I don't think the New York Times is saying, "Hey, AI is bad for us overall," because they're using AI themselves, right?
Yeah,
They just want to do it in a way where it's fair and not anti-competitive.
yeah,
So I have a feeling they're going to end up somewhere in the Supreme Court deciding where copyright law ends and um, intended use with the copyright, and the New York Times is going to be at the forefront of that, so they're going to get a front row seat to what's going on, which will be good for them.
good news
Um,
coverage. Yeah,
yeah, this will inevitably happen, whether it was New York Times or not. They'd have to talk about this. How does this law matter?
sure. It's almost like, all right, who's going to step up and take this on? And front these fees, get the coverage. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it's an elephant in the room that we need to address with everything coming AI related. Yeah, I understand it. It's a tough one, but why don't we move on to last thing before we get on to an interview with Scott from Coda? Why don't we talk about design? So this is created from a community member, Beck, a really, really great bubbler. And he created a Chrome extension that allows you to copy Figma elements and put them right into Bubble, which is really cool. And I've been playing with it for the last week. It's not perfect yet, but once he continues to dial it up, it has the possibility to really save you so much time.
yeah,
And there's some things that like, Framer kind of does this. They have an extension, Framer, Figma to Framer. And what Framer did with their extension is they were able to identify, elements within Figma. So an input, a button and whatnot, and then creatively create those things when you paste it in. And Beck is using not as advanced technology yet. He's essentially, you're labeling, if it's a button with an emoji,
Yeah,
right?
emoji.
But it will then convert that into a real button, so there's a little bit more work in the upfront to prepare your document for it, but it
Yeah.
actually will copy it into Bubble the right way with the right inputs, which is also really cool. And so maybe that just says, okay, when your designer is designing in Figma, they just naturally label these things the way it should be labeled, and then you just copy and paste right into Bubble from Figma from there, and that could be a good workflow.
Yeah, this is one of those things. It's super encouraging. I think lots of people have tried to do similar things to this.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a little bit of a debate right now in the Bubble community of Figma first or just go into Bubble.
Hmm.
I used to be staunchly in the just do it in Bubble community. And now I've definitely softened and more Figma first, where just design it and then build it. But there's so much work that's just mindless work, copying a Figma drawing or Figma design into a Bubble app that
Yeah.
should be automated. I'm very glad that we can automate it. This is one of those areas where I wish Bubble would just give Beck a bunch of money, give him access to certain things in the editor, and do this properly with documentation instead of guessing around on things. And then if Bubble changes stuff, all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I wish they were a bit more involved in something like this.
Yeah, with an integration such as Figma, like it's really important and really big. And they kind of have like that integration, it just doesn't work, right?
Oh yeah, it never worked.
Yeah, it never worked. And so they had this, and they just like, all right, it's a great idea, let's do it. And then it didn't work. So let's just, but it will save a ton of time, and it will encourage best practices, which I still think designing in Figma is. And
Yeah,
so I would love to see Bubble continue to encourage best practice with the development, because that professionalizes that, brings it up to that next level where they can then attract bigger clients, etc. So great job, Beck. Really excited for you. We're
yeah.
pulling for you, and community, go check it out. We're going to put the link to it in below. But without any further ado, let's bring on Scott from Coda and get on with our interview. Mr. Scott, how are you, my friend?
Hi guys, I'm good. How are you?
I'm
All
doing
right,
good.
good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, guys. Early
Happy New
January.
Year. Scott, the Coda guy. Where are you located? What's your story? Let's get right into it.
I'm in Ventura, California. Used to be up in the Bay, but now down here,
SoCal.
Los Angeles. It's a place
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah,
that's right.
awesome. But you weren't always a Coda guy. What were you before Coda?
I was not. I was a high school teacher. So I taught public high school, specifically students with disabilities. So that's what I
God
did
bless
before.
you.
Yeah.
How did you get into Coda? What's that story?
Yeah, totally. Special ed teaching is still really close to my heart. Love it. Loved working just in that community and with those students. But with that type of teaching, there's just a ton of kind of redundant, arduous paperwork style tasks that you need to do. And I was just committed as a teacher that like my life isn't going to be doing these kind of redundant kind of paperwork tasks. I'm going to spend time with my kids and I'm going to be teaching. And most of my colleagues were just spending hours and hours, up to 15, 20 hours a week, half of their job, just kind of doing these administrative tasks. And none of them really had good solutions. And in my mind, I had no tech background, but I was like, these have to be able to be automated, right? Like they're the same exact thing on every single time with very slight variations. I was like, there has to be a way to make this automatic. At this time, I had never heard of Zapier. I had never even written like a Google spreadsheet formula. I was just like, this is crazy. Like we're in the 21st
Pen and paper,
century.
Word documents, that was it.
Oh yeah, it was just nuts what people were doing, my colleagues. And so I was just committed. I was like, I know we're in the 21st century. There's got to be a solution. And so just started researching. I fell on Zapier. I started with like Google Sheets and just started messing around, but nothing really gave me the solution I was looking for, especially as someone who wasn't able to code. And then I fell on Coda. Still have no idea how. Coda was still in early private beta. You couldn't even sign up to get an account. You had to actually like apply, like, please give me an account. Let me use your product. So I remember, I don't even know what caught my eye about Coda online. I was just like, I'll sign up for this. This sounds maybe possible.
It could help, possibly.
Yeah. And then the rest was history. I just kind of stuck with Coda. I started building out my solution and just became obsessed with just the platform and how flexible it was and how quickly I was able to spin up solutions, especially with no tech background, and just really, really fell in love with it.
So how long were you building in Coda for yourself and your colleagues before you switched to Coda full time?
Doing full time? Great question. I would say about, I was a teacher for 5 years. And I would say I was using Coda as a teacher for about 3 to 3.5 years.
Wow.
So I would say, yeah. And I just slowly started using Coda for everything as a teacher. It's like, I'm going to do my lesson planning in Coda. I'm going to actually make interactive lessons for my students in Coda. I'm going to like manage my kids' grades in Coda. Like I just became obsessed with it and was like, I'm going to use it for everything for probably close to 3.5 years. And then was able to kind of step out and leave teaching behind and move more full-time into all things Coda.
Interesting. The problem you're solving reminds me, I don't know if you know Arvid. He's a big tech like Twitter guy. He has his own podcast. I think the company he founded that he was then able to kind of retire from was helping his wife, who was an international English teacher, run her like program through this like doc system. And it was just for like teaching English to students in China or something like that. And then it expanded from there. It was like she had to keep giving reports to the parents of what they learned and how they're doing. And it was like days of work every day to minutes, right? And so
very similar to what I was kind of building and trying to solve.
Yeah. So what made you go Coda consulting as opposed to Coda SaaS? Like selling that thing you had just done.
Same reason I didn't know why I landed on Coda, right? I just kind of felt like I was in this stream and in this current, and I just let it take me. So even my first couple clients that I started consulting for, I didn't reach out to. I didn't try to get them. Somehow they got a hold of me, and they were just like, hey, we've heard this grapevine. You're like good at this stuff, and we need some help. And building on Coda for 3 years at my school, it never occurred to me that there was businesses who would need help. I was just totally ignorant. Until people started reaching out to me, being like, we want your help and we will pay you. I started charging $15 an hour. It was awesome. Like less than you'll make at like McDonald's, you know? Had no idea what I was doing, but it just felt like I was in this current. And I didn't really actively make choices to get where I am. It just kind of, I just kept walking through doors as they would open. And now, own a consulting agency, worked with over 150 clients, and we're a team of 7 or 8 people now. So
before we get there, I want to know a little bit more about your journey. Was it only just Coda? Was it Airtable, Notion, some other stuff as well? Or was it,
Coda. And then there was just this point. I've got 2 kids, and so my risk tolerance is way lower. I can't tolerate much risk because if I mess up and don't make a paycheck, I'm affecting 2 little people rather than just myself. You know, I think there's this thought if it was just myself, I'd go live with my parents. I'd go live in a van if, you know, I didn't make ends meet for a month. But there's just a lot higher consequence when you've got a little family. And so there was this point where I think I was just nervous, like leaving teaching and consulting. And so I actually hopped and got a full-time job internally at a large tech company doing Airtable. And they were committed to Airtable. I was like, hey guys, we should do Coda. It's way better. And they were like, we're already embedded with Airtable. We'll just keep doing that. So I worked full-time doing no-code, low-code stuff with Airtable. They were in the health space, so they were governed by HIPAA. So Airtable is not HIPAA compliant. If you're wondering, HIPAA, it's just like how the government regulates how you store and manage health data. And there's a lot of platforms that you can't do it on. So you can't store and manage health data in Airtable in any way. So I was just stretched a lot in that company because I was hired as an Airtable expert, but all of a sudden we needed solutions with health data. So I started whipping up Google App Script. I would teach myself to code and just kind of was this Swiss Army knife of a no-code, low-code, webhook Airtable expert. Again, as I talk about that current, right, I feel like I didn't make any active choices. Then economy, they laid off 50% of their staff, which was a very huge cut. So I was part of that 50%. And was that
the whole new company was formed?
Yeah.
pretty much.
So it was a lot of people. Yeah, it was like 300-400 people who were all let go at once. But I was one of those. And so now I was at this crossroads where I was like, I kind of still had consulting on the side. I just was more taking like as leads would come to me. I still had a lot of leads. I would just pass them to other people kind of for a referral fee. Like, hey, here's a lead. Take this. And I was looking at the amount of inbound leads I had, and I was like, you know what? I'm at the point where I think I feel comfortable doing this full time. But
That's so scary.
I don't know. It wasn't like very clear. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm going to make so much money. It was a really hard decision because I was just very nervous for my family and like, can I make as much as I can? So I said, you know what? I'm going to give myself 6 months. My company gave 4 months of
Severance.
Yeah, they gave 4 months of severance.
That's
I
awesome.
said, I'm going to write off that severance and then I'll do 2 months afterwards. And that'll give me enough insight into this kind of consulting gig to understand whether or not it can support me full time.
Yeah.
And not just kind of support me where we're like worried every month, but like support me where we're able to fully relax and just live our life as a family and, you know, send my kid to school and go on vacations. And worst comes to worst, it's not. And 6 months later, I'll apply for another job. But no, it's a good year out now. I think we're over a year from being laid off. So.
Oh, it's been that quick, actually.
Yeah, it's been a while. So yeah, we definitely passed that 6 months mark a long while ago and had to make
Well, yeah, I mean, just a year passed. I mean, that's not that long ago. That's pretty recent.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that makes where you're at now even more impressive. So you're at 6 or 7 person company. You're a Coda agency. Tell us more about the agency. Is it just Coda?
Yeah, so our branding.
Yes, no.
If you look, I don't know if this podcast people can like watch it, but if you look behind my head, there's like a Coda symbol. I'm the Coda guy. It's like I'm a little bit.
Not just a Coda guy. You're the
Coda guy.
Again, didn't think about that name. It was just kind of like I had to make a Twitter account. It was just the first thing that came to mind, and I put it down, and it kind of stuck.
It worked.
Nice.
It's our brand.
Better than Bubble Boy.
It's our brand. It's our brand, but it's not what we do fully. So I would say Coda is our main anchor point. So I would say our clients come to us thinking they have a Coda problem. So in their mind, they're like, I have a Coda problem. I need the best Coda developers there are. So hopefully the goal is they stumble upon us, which they do often. And then from there, we're not just, a hammer trying to hammer down a nail and find a nail, right? We just really listen to our clients and try to understand, like, what is your issue? Like, what are you trying to solve? What workflows are you trying to optimize? Why are you trying to optimize these workflows? What solutions are you trying to bring to your team as you scale? And then from there, oftentimes we'll do a lot of Coda work, right? Because it is like, we believe in the platform. It's an extremely powerful and flexible platform to develop on and to collaborate and to just get work done on. So oftentimes it's like, hey, you know what? Yeah, we're going to develop a workflow or solution on Coda that's going to help your hiring system, in your entire HR team. But many times, even when we're anchored in Coda, it's like, well, we're going to do that in Coda, but we also have to work with your HR system, whether that's Greenhouse or some other platform. And then we're also going to have to work with other integrations with email and pieces. So we touch a ton of different platforms, but sometimes our answers aren't Coda, right? Sometimes we'll listen to our clients' problems and they'll say, this is our problem. We need this Coda thing built for it. And we say, actually, like, you're going to regret building that on Coda in the long run because you're going to have 1 million records of data size in the next 6 months, and Coda can't handle 1 million records of data size. Like, I wish it could. I'd put you there if it would, but it don't. So let's look at other solutions. So I'd say we anchor in Coda, we brand as Coda. Most of the work we do is Coda, but we really work on solving teams' issues. And if that's not Coda, we'll figure out the solution.
What kind of work are they looking for? Like these big companies, what kind of work are they looking for?
Yeah, I think it's internal tooling. So I think when you think of like a business buys software, right? They buy software to solve a solution, but software that is out there that you can go purchase is by design pretty general, right? Because that software team needs their product to appeal to a general large audience. And oftentimes the people we work with are like, you know what? There's like 3 platforms out there that we've looked at and they're kind of what we need, but like our business is unique. Like our business isn't exactly mirrored by the softwares that are offered out there. So we need something a bit different. And so oftentimes it's really that, like, rather than signing up for X, Y, and Z software, they'll hire us to make it for them on Coda because they want it exactly tailored to their company. And so whenever we get new leads, people often will be like, don't you have a template? Like, have you done this before for a client? And can we just have that? I'm like, no, like we don't do anything that we just give you, because everything we make is so tailored to that company's unique workflows or issues, our culture. And then we build them software to kind of last.
It's interesting that you say that, because as you're saying it, it makes me think like when you're a small company, you can change your procedure to fit the software. When you're a large company, the inertia you need to get 1,000 people to change what they're doing to fit this new piece of software that helps is way harder than building something that does it exactly the way they're doing, just better.
Yeah.
Right? Without anyone needing to change anything, it fits to the T what they're doing.
Totally. If it's the team, I have a team that it's kind of silly, but they use poop emojis all the time. They deal with wipes and bathroom products. And so internally in their culture, it's just kind of this jokey thing that they do a lot of things with like poops and poops emojis. And they were just like, it sounds weird, but we kind of want that a part of our tool. And it's like, all right, like we'll make those rituals, right? I think thinking about it, like it's silly, it sounds funny, but it's a ritual that they have as a company that has like helped establish this internal culture that kind of bonds them and helps them interact and be a team, you know? And so I think of this like this way of like, you can have these unique company rituals and culture, and you can kind of embed them into your workflows and into your tools in ways that standard software just can't support.
How do you structure your contracts? Is it like a one-time build? Is it an ongoing fee, like a referral thing? What do you see for most of your contracts?
We've got three main types. Number one is coaching and education, right? So people will get private Slack channels with our team, and we'll set weekly meetings. And we're really just trying to equip their team to understand Coda to its fullest extent. And that includes both like very general training for the entire organization. So it's just like your entire organization needs to feel comfortable on this platform and using it to work. And then there's other individuals who need to become these developers to be able to take your company's rituals or rhythms and create tools out of them. And so how do we partner with you to equip the whole team and a few set of individual developers to really use and leverage Coda? The others are projects. So people will come to us and just say, we want this built, and this is exactly how, and here's the wireframe, and here's the flow and how we want data to work, and here's the integrations, and we'll just give them a quote and build it. And the other ones are more like retainer long-term. So there's a couple clients we've had we're in our second year. I don't think we're at the third year yet. I think we're in our second year partnering alongside them consistently. And it's just, we're like this general technology partner that assists them as they continue to scale and grow. And as they scale and grow, there's always new needs. And so there's always new ways we can support them in getting their business done.
Have you found anyone grow out of Coda? I mean, it seems like sometimes you add other tools into it. Has there ever been in a scenario where someone just leaves Coda completely, that starts on Coda and then goes, crap, this didn't work?
I'm sure they have been. None of our clients, because we do a lot of qualifying in the initial call, you know, if they're like that. So some of the big red flags we look for are like security of data and size of data. And so if they have very clear ideas of like, we need these kind of external sharing things with complete security, like once you get into that realm and those questions, Coda doesn't play as well. Coda is more meant to be an internal tool, right? So for my company, what's going to empower our work as a company and as an organization. The moment you try to extend Coda to become more like this externally available SaaS, it gets way murkier. There are ways to bend it towards that, but it's way shakier ground. And the next one is data size, right? So I would say Coda plays well in a single table. So in a single Coda like doc, they call them a doc, which is like a Coda instance. You can have multiple tables, but I would say in a single table, you don't grow beyond, at least at the time of speaking, between like 50 to 70,000 rows worth of data. So if a team will ask a lot, like, okay, like how much incoming requests, if we're going to have a table of requests, maybe they're like, man, we have about 5,000 requests a week. And media, it's like, ooh, that's a problem because Coda's going to stop working. So then it's either, is there a terminal state to a request that we can either archive it or delete it? And if the answer is like, no, we need these all to be active and like log notification at the time, then Coda is not your solution. It's not meant to scale and grow to those large data sizes.
Would you go to something like, but we could store that in Zeno and then bring that over from Zeno into Coda? Would you do
Yeah, do you
something
guys
like that
pronounce
with
it
them?
Zano?
Huh?
Do you guys pronounce it Zano?
Zano?
I'd say
Zano?
Zano.
That's
Zano?
so cool. I don't know what it's called. I pronounce it Zano. We actually just
Send
launched
it
our
to X Town and bring it back when you need it.
yeah. Coda has an opens PAX platform. The PAX is the word for their integrations, how Coda integrates and shares data with other services. That platform is open, meaning that individuals or third parties can build integrations and publish them. So we actually published this week a Xano integration for Coda so that you can actually use Xano as your backend to your data store. And then you can use Coda as your front end. So you pull in your data from those databases and use all of Coda's buttons and charts and collaborative features for that. And so that is our attempt because, again, your initial question was, do people ever grow out? I said,
Yeah.
not yet, because if we notice in our qualifying conversation that they're going to outgrow it really soon or already are too big for it, we'll push them away. But there are some current clients we have where we're realizing, like, if you keep using this for a year and your business grows as you expect it to, we're going to get into murky waters. And so that's where this Xano pack comes from, right? This ability to take, hey, we already have workflows and rituals working in Coda. Our team loves this platform. Our team knows how to work on this platform rather than abandoning that. And as Harrison used it before, right? Like, institutional habits are so hard to break. If there's an institutional habit in an organization, deprecating that and starting new ones is difficult. So oftentimes if this Xano pack is that attempt to say, hey, you have this habit of Coda. Your team knows it. Your team knows how to use it. You're comfortable on it. As you grow, let's not abandon Coda as your platform of choice. And let's also store a ton of data.
It seems actually really big for your company because now maybe you won't disqualify them if they have more than 1 million records kind of thing, because it's like, okay, well, we'll just do that with Xano and then bring it in the Coda. Is that
Yeah,
right?
totally. And I mean, there's definitely, we have one client right now we're talking about doing a first Coda Xano partnership with where it makes a lot of sense. I haven't landed it yet. I'll let you know if we do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Coda does have limits too, right? Because to pull in data to Coda from an external database has limits. You can only do 10,000 at a time. So there still has to be that, like, you have to be okay with having 10,000 active records in your application. And so the use case where it's like, we want 1 million records for historical data, but like maybe there's a team, right? Maybe out of those 1 million records, there's a ton of teams and those records are associated with different teams. So maybe in different docs, Coda docs, you sync in just a slice of those records that are relevant. So there's still limits, right? Like all of a sudden Xano isn't this all of a sudden like magical cure. But if the use case is correct, you can continually pull in slices of your data that are relevant to you and never lose all the data you have.
So Notion versus Coda.
Good question.
So high level differences and high level differences. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, if you ask me Airtable versus Coda, I can speak a lot more authoritatively because I worked, full-time 8 hours a day.
All right, Airtable versus Coda.
But Notion, I'll speak a bit about Notion. I have a lot of friends in the Notion space too. And so I really respect Notion as a product. I think, though, people have a misconception that they're closer products than they are. And I think that's because they look the same, right? Like they have pages. And if you go on a page, it has an icon and a title. And there's also a header image above it. And it's got like
your slash
tables,
commands and all your composer, everything. Yeah.
So I think externally they look similar. So people who've spent, all their life in Notion and then go spend a couple days in Coda, just say, this is another Notion and I don't know how to use it. So I like Notion better.
Sure.
Or maybe they spend 10 minutes in both and they're just like, man, this is the same. But if you really dive deep into the products, they're very different in terms of what like use cases, right? If you just fiddle with them for a couple days, it'll feel very similar. But as you really start to dive into like what sort of use cases can this support, Coda is a far different product in terms of, and I would say it differentiates because of its formula language. Notion did launch a Notion Formulas 2.0, which gave it a lot. It's a lot closer, but it's still missing things called action formulas in Coda, which still clearly differentiate Coda's formula language. I wrote a whole article on why they're still different. And then I think the next is packs and integrations. Coda has this really robust packs and integration system for people to use. And I think those two alone really make Coda into more of a true web app development platform. Like you can really create like true software tools
Power
on it.
scale.
Yeah. And then, I mean, a ton of our clients are people who are like, we started in Notion and we just kept hitting obstacle after obstacle and wall after wall where we couldn't push it far enough.
Mhm.
And then we do it in Coda and it does what they want. So I would say,
Yeah.
but I would say Notion does better, honestly. Like if you're just looking for like, we want to store a ton of data, a ton of information, like a wiki, a knowledge center, a knowledge hub, I think Notion's better suited for those types of workflows. If you're like, we need to integrate with a lot of services, we need to run webhooks and like hit other APIs, and we need these like custom kind of software like tools that we're actually building for our team, Coda makes way more sense.
And then what about Airtable? Where does Airtable fit into all this?
Yeah, people, man, so many people, when they start talking to me about Coda, they're like, it's just like not a database. And I'm like, yes, it is. It's a relational database. So Coda is a relational database. Airtable is a relational database.
Yeah.
Coda just kind of has another layer on top where it mixes.
Interface.
Yeah. Let's talk about like structured and unstructured data, right? Coda is a perfect blend of the two. Your structured data, your tables, rows, columns, cells, data types. It's very structured and ordered. Unstructured data is writing paragraphs, just like pumping out brain dumps and ideas and collaborating with others. Coda attempts to blend those worlds, right? Rather than holding all your structured data in this platform and your unstructured data over here, it's like, what does it look like when we combine those two? And that's what Coda does really well. So it combines this idea of structured and unstructured data really, really helpfully. I would say if we just compared database to database, Coda is actually a stronger database product as well, right? If you stripped away all the other parts of Coda and just said, let's just take the database product versus the database product, you're going to find a stronger product, and you're going to find a formula language that is years beyond where Airtables is at. Airtable reminds me of MySpace in some ways. Like it was the first, it's got a lot of traction, but like other people learned from what they did and their mistakes. And that said, to be fair, Airtable will perform better at higher record counts. So if you're running into the 50, I would say above 50,000, Coda can run really well, but you have to be really, really good at Coda to make sure you're architecting it in ways that won't slow it down. If you're building an Airtable, it will go past 50 and you're going to be pretty fine. So
is Airtable limited to 1 million? Do you know?
No, Airtable is limited to is it 100,000? But they say on their pricing plans, and it's also by pricing plan, right? So if you want higher record counts in Airtable, you've got to have an enterprise plan, or else Airtable just simply won't let you add more records.
Right.
But
then in the scale of the audience, I think it's something like Notion, Airtable, Coda, right? Like in terms of size, you think?
That's Coda's question. I mean, Coda is definitely the smallest, for sure. Coda is the smallest on there. Airtable versus Notion, I don't know about that.
It's really big. Both of those are really big.
Both of them are really big.
I think Coda's a small guy in the block.
Coda's a tall guy on the block, for sure.
Yeah, it feels like almost like Bubble versus Webflow, early days Bubble, where it's like this powerful little scrappy tool versus Webflow, which is like everybody uses this, mainstream, etc. Kind of powerful, up and coming kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Coda's small guy.
And we have time for a few more questions, but I'm curious, what's the biggest feature request you'd have from Coda? What are you waiting for them?
Yeah, there's a difference between what I want. I'm in even a niche of Coda, right? A lot of people use Coda very simply. I would think of this idea in like utility, right? Like I think a product is great when it has high utility at both the high and the low ends of its complexity. So think about a Google Sheet, right? I've used Google Sheets for years. And there were years that I used Google Sheets where I never even wrote a single formula, right? I just used it to structure and hold data, which is extremely helpful, right? People can just write down information, write down lists. They can catalog expenses. And that's high utility at a very low floor. You can go on it with no coding, no nothing knowledge, and use it tomorrow. But then you can build like the most wildly ridiculous things on Excel and Google Sheets. If you've seen, I think they even had a Excel competition recently where it was like an esport competition.
So, yeah.
Totally, right? So it's like this like low floor, high ceiling, and there's high utility at both ends.
Just like a video game. You could tinker around, or you could be world class.
Totally. But it's fun on both ways. Like, right? If you've never played one of these video games before, it could still be fun to just play them out. I think Coda is the same way. And that it's got lots of utility at this low end. You never need to know a formula. You never need to develop on it. You can just start working with your team on it tomorrow and be very happy. We exist as consultants on the high end of the complexity. Like no one needs help with these really simple things. They need help with the hard things. So most of the requests I have of Coda are pretty niche because they're very, very like silly.
Really stretching the boundary.
Yeah, for sure. Which I could share about, but those are very silly. And then there's also like, there's certain things that Coda will come out with this year that I'm very excited for.
So what? Give us one of each. What is
Which
the
are-
thing you're most excited about? And the thing
Coda, and this isn't a secret. They've published it on their communities publicly. They have a feature right now called sync pages. And sync pages as a feature now that you could go use are actually an intermediary feature, meaning they're like a little child who's moving towards a final goal. The final goal, though, in a Coda, it's like a big doc, right? And you may have a doc that runs your company. And in there, you have HR and you have finances and you have team and you have sales, right? What if you just wanted to share your HR section with somebody? Right now, there's no really way to do that in Coda. It's like a doc is the whole thing. You either share the whole thing or you share none of it. So a hugely requested feature is to be able to share slices or subsets of your documents to people securely. And so that's what sync pages, the end state of what sync pages is now, should provide for people this year. So
yeah, that seems like a no-brainer, especially when you get into organizations, larger scale enterprises.
Totally.
You need to have. Do you have user groups in Coda that you can share to at like a user permission level?
Yeah, so if you're going to create a doc, like you can do all sorts of stuff like you would in Bubble, right? Like where
Okay.
basically you have user groups and you can like set permissions, and then
Yeah.
someone comes to a task table, and if they have admin permissions, they're going to see all tasks. If
Yeah.
they don't have admin permissions, but
if there's links, they can still access all their docs.
None of
and
it is
everything.
native. Like you won't find that anywhere in Coda. I built a video on it. The video is on YouTube called Access Tables Coda, just sort of like Access Tables Coda. It's kind of a method I devised, but essentially you create raw databases of users and user groups. And then on the tables itself, you kind of reference those to go like, who is the logged in user? And then go look at the table to find out what permission they've been granted. And depending on that, show X number of records.
Yeah.
But that to say, I don't know how technical your audience is. All the data is loaded to the front end every time, no matter what. So it's technically it's a front end filter is all it is. So if you have someone who is motivated enough, they can find it because Coda loads all the data right away. But because Coda is not trying to be a web app development platform. Right. They're trying to be a collaborative internal tool.
Makes sense.
Probably works for most use cases, but some
for most use cases, it's totally fine. Like I'll tell my clients that and be very clear, like this is how security and permissions and filters work. And they're like, oh yeah, that's fine. That's totally great.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. That's great.
Wow.
So I was very, very surprised. I guess I know nothing about Coda, or very little, except for how we use it, which is more like Sheets and
a very basic way. We use it kind of like Notion, which is just like a very basic,
right. That's where it's like high floor or high ceiling, low floor, and there's utility at both ends.
Yeah.
You don't have to use it like a crazy madman to get a lot of value from it.
Yeah, we use it for our show notes
open right now on the screen.
Yeah. So Scott, last question before we leave you for today. What do you think about the no-code industry going into 2024, 2025? Where are we going? You going to stick with Coda being niche? You going more agnostic? What are your just general thoughts?
Yeah, this is interesting question based on what I shared earlier, in that I feel like the position I'm in now, I've got to mostly by just allowing the current to take me, right? Yeah. I didn't make much of these active choices about where to end up. I kind of just stepped through open doors. And I think that was a really valuable thing to do at the beginning of my business because I just needed to learn, right? Mm-hmm. So I think when you say no to something, there's a large opportunity cost in saying no because you say no to the chance to learn and expose yourself to those things. So I just said yes to everything. I think I'm at the point in my business and in the no-code space now where I can make active choices based off of strategic goals. So I think, yes, I never want to lose this Coda branding one because I love Coda. I think it's the best no-code tool out there. But Coda isn't trying to solve every problem. right? And I don't want to make Coda solve every problem, but customers have other problems that Coda doesn't make sense for. So we are looking as an agency, like, what does that look like for us this year? What does that look like for us to branch out of Coda alone and be able to just really more keep that core goal of solving customers' problems rather than solving customers' problems with Coda. So we're looking at, I'm really excited about another platform called Smart Suite. I don't know if you guys know
Yeah.
about Smart Suite. It's awesome. Especially as someone who knows Airtable, coming to Smart Suite was just this breath of fresh air. I was like, oh, you guys thought about that. Like, that is so cool. Another one where the Airtable and Smart Suite to the non-clued in user would say this is the same product. Why would I ever use Smart Suite? But if you really start diving in, you realize, oh no, Smart Suite's a very different product than Airtable in terms of the use cases that it's going to enable. So there's thoughts about us looking at, what does it look like to develop a Smart Suite? We actually already do some WeWeb and Xano work. It's like, what does it look like to kind of expand that branch and that arm of our agency? So lots of thoughts, but no decisions.
Very cool. It seems like you're just becoming more open to clients' needs and less open to a specific tool. Just, I'm going to take on the clients that make sense for my business, whatever tool that may be. We'll staff up accordingly and we'll make that happen.
Yeah, totally. But excited for the no-code space, man. I feel like it's a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So it's like the more that no-code can just continue to become mainstream, the better everybody does.
Agreed. Awesome. Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to make sure to put your socials and handles in the description of this podcast. It's available on all platforms, including YouTube, and it's going to be coming out very shortly. Saturday mornings we release, so we'll keep you updated. But otherwise, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you soon.
All right, guys.
All right. See you, pal. Awesome. So, Coda.
We need to figure out how to use it more. Harrison is a big proponent to it, so maybe we'll push him to build some stuff for us.
Harrison, our producer, he's funny because I've recently learned Notion very well, and he's a big Coda guy, and so I was like, "Hey, Harrison, I know Notion now," and he's like, "Oh," and he gets his blood going, I can see it.
Bother.
Yeah, and I love it. But what I thought was funny or true is, like, I use Notion for very basic wiki stuff, course organization stuff, very basic stuff where it's just dead simple and it's a really fun application, right? I don't need to do any kind of integrations or anything like that. And so it makes sense there. Also, I feel like it is a good primer to learning Coda because you still get, you learn how to build databases in your doc structure and your pages and your formulas and all that kind of stuff. So it's a good start to learning Coda, but haven't found the need to like really nerd out on Coda yet. I'm sure there are use cases though.
I mean, obviously he's got built the whole business on it, helping big customers who are using Coda. It makes me really think that we should learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah, the thing that he didn't really talk about is he doesn't build MVPs really. It's like these are internal tooling, these are automations, and he has a 7 or 8 person business on it doing very well. And he has bigger clientele, like the folks, he can't name them, but he works with major companies that are using Coda and other platforms and need this tooling, right? And I think I'm really bullish on that kind of being the thing that gets these bigger companies into more no-code solutions, and on how we can access them is they don't need an MVP. They already got a really, really good thing.
But they need a business doing stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. They need automations. They need operations. They need efficiencies. They need sales and metrics and forecasts. All these things that can be supported in many different types of tooling, Coda being one of them. Bubble, Xano, WeWeb, all these things can come together to just satisfy clients' needs.
Yeah. There's lots of cool stuff being built with lots of cool tools. Most importantly is picking the right tool for the job, right? Sometimes Bubble is overkill. You don't need it for everything. And using something like Coda makes sense, as he said, in certain scenarios. In any scenarios it is.
It really begs the question, like if you would have asked me, David, 2 years ago, and I'm on record for saying this, do you learn a lot of cool tools or do you become an expert in one? And I went the whole expert in one route, right? And I still believe that route to be very beneficial to me because I've had a great career and I'm very grateful. But I do feel like we are at the time where you need to know a lot of tools. Because clients' needs are expanding, tools capabilities are expanding, and what you're able to do with so many different things is just incredible. And one tool isn't enough anymore, is how I feel.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Speed is going to matter, and picking the right tool enables that speed properly. And learning some new stuff is never a bad thing.
Yeah. But what I do love about Bubble is as it's so advanced that when you go to learn new stuff, the things are much easier to learn, right?
Mhm.
You already got these core concepts, you got these core structures and theories, and you know how to build stuff for the web. And then it's like, okay, here's how I build a database in this way, and here's my table, and here's my field, here's my relationship, and what's a roll up? Well, it's a database search with like all this kind of stuff. And so it starts to come together really well. And I'll leave this episode saying that I'm just having a ton of fun with no code right now. Like I'm just dabbling and learning a ton, and it's really awesome. And
Yeah.
so I love this industry, and I'm really happy to be in it.
Yeah. Ditto.
Awesome. So if you haven't yet, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, like us, subscribe to us on YouTube. We are going to do what we can to continue to grow this podcast in the new year. If you want to advertise with us, let us know. We will then return that money to reinvest in growing this podcast because we believe in it. We've heard great feedback. And if there's anything that we can do to make it better, let us know as well. We enjoy bringing this to you, and we need your support to make it better. But otherwise, that's it for this week in No Code. And David,
See you next week in No Code.
see you next week in No Code, guys. See ya.